Good morning, Dan Lucero from 580 Sports Talk here, coming to you from Lucero Studios, just down the hall from our actual studios here at 580 WIBW. We've got playoff baseball on the radio today, which means we don't have an edition of 580 Sports Talk. The Kansas City Royals began their playoff adventure this afternoon with a 3:08 Central Time first pitch at Oriole Park at Camden Yards as they take on the Baltimore Orioles. So 580 Sports Talk is off today, but we didn't want to leave you without some thoughts on some of the biggest sports stories of the day. All the stuff we would get to if we had a show today. In that vein, this is the first ever edition that I've ever done of what I'm calling the No Show Today show. Anytime we would have a show under normal circumstances, but don't, so not like holidays, but on a day like today, special days when you get preempted by things that are special, like October Royals baseball, we'll put together a little something like this to run you through some quick sports headlines and get you caught up on what's going on in the broader world of sports. It's the No Show Today show, and it starts right now. The first big headline of the day, the Kansas City Royals made it official. Vinnie Pasquantino is back. They tweeted this image earlier this morning and delighted Royals fans everywhere. The implication was obvious that just 5 weeks after breaking his thumb in Houston, an injury that some thought could even be season-ending, the Royals' first baseman, who drove in 97 runs before having his regular season come to an end late August in that game against the Astros, is back. He is on the 26-man roster for the American League Wild Card Series, and it is being reported by the likes of Jeff Passan of ESPN that he'll bat third for the Royals, his familiar spot in Matt Quatrero's batting order. Obviously, that's a massive lift for the Royals, and not just on the field, where they get back a lefty power bat in a ballpark that is friendlier to left-handed power than it is to right-handed power, and they get back their everyday first baseman, the player who was leading the team in runs batted in before he was injured. All the on-field implications are obviously great for the Royals, but there's the intangible stuff too. The fact that Vinnie Pasquantino is a leader on this team, is a good vibes guy, for lack of a better way to put it sometimes. I'm delighted for Vinnie that he gets a chance to experience the postseason, and I'm delighted for his teammates that they get to have that guy back on the field with them, back in the lineup with them, back trying to win a championship together. It's an awesome feat of healing, for lack of a better way to say it. The fact that he is back in the lineup after missing just a month when most thought it would be a 6 to 8 week recovery from the thumb injury. But he was getting hacks in, swings in, on the field, in the cages. And you could tell on the night of the champagne celebration on Friday night when they were talking to him inside the locker room, he looked like a guy who knew a secret. He looked like a guy who knew that this was going to be possible for him. And would you look at this? He is back, and he is going to play today in game one of this playoff series. And the Royals' chances of advancing through the American League playoffs, well, they get a whole lot better with Vinnie in the mix. As for who will join Pasquantino in the lineup or on the roster, the Royals releasing their 26-man roster for the playoffs earlier today. Just 11 pitchers on the 26-man roster. They are the only team to take 11 pitchers. Most teams are taking 12. Of course, through the regular season, most teams do an even split, 13 pitchers, 13 position players. But in a best-of-3 series, you're not thinking you need quite as much bullpen depth. You can go with fewer arms. The Royals, trusting their starting pitching, of course, they're going to go with 11 pitchers. The pitchers who were on the roster at the end of the season who did not make this roster were Alec Marsh and Carlos Hernandez. We, of course, know the starting rotation for Kansas City in this series. It'll be Cole Reagans this afternoon for game one, Seth Lugo tomorrow for game two, Michael Wacha for game three if necessary. The only position player that gets squeezed out was Robbie Grossman, who had been acquired as a waiver pickup. It's an awkward fit for Grossman, who can help against left-handed pitching, but the Royals are already really right-handed, and he doesn't really have a position. He's not a great defensive outfielder. So I think the Royals kept the right 15 position players. Freddie Fermin and Salvador Perez behind the plate. The infielders, Paul DeJong, Adam Frazier, Maikel Garcia, Yuli Gurriel, Garrett Hampson, Michael Massey. Vinnie Pasquantino, and Bobby Witt Jr. And in the outfield, Dairon Blanco, Kyle Isbell, MJ Melendez, Tommy Pham, and Hunter Renfroe. I think that's the right mix. I think it allows Matt Quatraro to fire some pinch-hitting bullets late in games, some right-handed bats with the possibility of going to a Yuli Gurriel, who's been good against left-handed pitching in his career. Can also go to a left-handed bat like MJ Melendez, see if maybe he can pop one over the big wall in the short porch in right field at Oriole Park in Camden Yards. And, of course, the speed of a guy like Dairon Blanco can make a difference as well. That's who the Royals will run out there as their 26-man roster. Again, game 1, 3:08 this afternoon. It'll be Cole Ragans. It'll be Corbin Burnes. It should be a great pitching matchup. Of course, I said that when those two locked horns earlier this year back in April, and neither pitcher got through the 5th inning. In fact, Ragans didn't make it through the 2nd inning in that game. So here's hoping for a much better pitcher's duel that is as advertised. And, of course, here's hoping the Royals come out on top. Of course, the rest of the MLB postseason opens up today as well. All 4 wild card series get going today. The first game, Detroit against Houston in Houston. Then in the late games over in the National League, you have the Mets at the Brewers and the Braves at the Padres in those National League series. I put together my playoff bracket. I think all the high seeds are going to win the wild card series. I'll start with the National League because it's a really simple explanation. The Mets and the Braves had to play 2 high-pressure baseball games yesterday in Atlanta, and then both teams had to get on a plane and travel. For the Mets, this will be their 4th game in a 3rd different city in 3 days, and that's never an easy thing to have to do. So I think the deck is stacked against the Braves and the Mets, and I think the Padres and the Brewers are going to advance with relative ease in the National League. Over in the American League, I know the Tigers are a great story and the hottest team in baseball since early August, but they've run into a Houston team that just finds a way to get it done in October. They are serial winners. They are champions. They have that pedigree, and I think that's going to be too difficult for Detroit to overcome in this short series. So I like Houston to advance in this one. All right, Orioles, Royals. I want to pick the Royals so bad. I do. And there's really compelling reasons to pick the Royals in this series. I think they have the starting pitching advantage. Even though Corbin Burnes is a stud going game 1 for Baltimore, the Royals would have a significant edge in game 2 with Seth Lugo and in a game 3, if necessary, with Michael Wacha. Also, I think the Royals have the bullpen edge. Their bullpen has been the best in the American League down the stretch. In the last 2 weeks, no one was better. In the last month, few were better than the Royals' revamped relief group. The Orioles, on the flip side, not so good in the late innings, relying on a closer, giving up 2.5 home runs per 9 innings in Sir Anthony Dominguez. Pitching is an advantage for the Royals in this series. But there's something else about what Baltimore does and what the Royals don't do, and that is hit the ball over the fence. You got to hit the ball far to go far in October. Ball go far, team go far. The Orioles were 2nd in the American League in home runs in the regular season. They've got more power from both sides of the plate, but crucially at Oriole Park and Camden Yards, they've got that left-handed power. Getting Vinnie Pasquantino back helps for the Royals, but most of their power is from the right side, and that right-handed power doesn't play nearly as well with the deep wall in left field at Camden Yards. So as much as I want to pick the Royals in this series, I really do. I think they've got a great chance. I just think the Orioles have the advantage when it comes to offense. The Royals didn't really score a lot in the final month of the season. Adding Vinny, again, a big help. But Baltimore has the thumpers, I think, that really make a difference in a shortened series because rallies hard to come by. You need to hit the ball over the fence. Ball go far, team go far. I really want to pick the Royals, but I can't do it. I think it's going to be Baltimore. I think the series is going the full distance. I think it's going 3 games. I think the Royals are going to get 1, but I've got the high seeds winning in the wild card round. As for the rest of the postseason, here are my projections. I've got the Yankees and the Astros winning the division series over the Orioles and Guardians, respectively. I think the Phillies and the Padres advance out of the National League. I think the Dodgers are just out of pitching. As good as their lineup is, I don't think they can get through even a best of 5 with the pitchers that they have on hand. So I think the Padres are going to get them. In the ALCS, I've got, again, the serial winners, the Astros, moving on to another World Series where they will play the Phillies. Yankees are really good. I guess I should rephrase. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto are really good. If Aaron Judge and Juan Soto are anything less than Aaron Judge and Juan Soto for a series, I don't think that team can go anywhere. So I will pick a Phillies-Astros World Series, and in the end, they're the best team in the regular season. I think they will be the best team when it's all said and done. Philadelphia Phillies are my pick to win the World Series. Transitioning to football, and we don't know what's wrong with Rashee Rice's knee right now. We know it doesn't look good. We know that there wasn't a lot of optimism coming from Andy Reid and the rest of the Chiefs following his injury in Sunday's 17-10 win at the Chargers in Los Angeles. But if Rashee Rice had a simple torn ACL that was going to cost him the rest of the season, you kind of feel like we would have heard that by now, right? But as of this morning, that's not what we've heard. And Adam Schefter reported last night that more tests are needed, more second opinions are being sought. That could go one of two ways. That could mean that there might actually be some optimism that maybe it wasn't as bad an injury as initially feared. But the flip side of that is maybe the doctors are looking at something they really haven't seen very often. And that's a scary thought, to think that they might have to deal with this knee injury in a much more delicate way than they would if it were a straightforward torn knee ligaments. So I guess there's still some hope around Rashee Rice. Again, wouldn't call it optimism, but I would call it some hope, because they have not been willing yet to completely rule him out. It doesn't sound like the tests that they need to do on Rice's knee are going to be done until next week. So the Chiefs standout wide receiver in a little bit of limbo, and that kind of means the Chiefs are too, which is not a great place for them to be as they move forward. Speaking of the National Football League, there was a doubleheader on Monday Night Football last night. Doubleheader in air quotes. Both games played at the same time. That's not a doubleheader. The Titans and the Dolphins was disgusting. I don't remember the final score. I don't ever want to think about that game ever again in my life, except to say this. The Dolphins are cooked. And not having a contingency plan for an injury to Tua Tagovailoa appears to have been a catastrophic failure on the part of the Dolphins organization. They look cooked. They look like they are just about ready to go through the motions the rest of the way. The fun one, as we expected, was Lions Seahawks, a offensive showcase, as it always seems to be when those two teams get together. In the end, the Lions offense too much for Seattle in a 42-29 win, as Seattle's defense, which had been the best in football through 3 weeks, kind of looks like that was more a product of them facing bummy quarterbacks than it was them actually being that kind of good. Although it should be noted, Seattle's top 4 defensive linemen were out for that game, and they lost their best safety, Julian Love, at halftime to an injury. And they really missed every single one of those guys against that Lions offense. Jared Goff was literally perfect, did not throw an incomplete pass. Geno Smith balled out for Seattle. I think you feel really good about the Seahawks offense after that game, but certainly the defense still appears to be a work in progress under Mike McDonald. And the Lions, well, they're who we thought they were, near the top of the list, maybe the top of the list of the NFC contenders. Couple of more things we'll get to here on the No Show Today show. First is the breaking news this morning of more realignment coming in the world of college sports. It's being widely reported that UTEP, University of Texas, El Paso, will be joining the Mountain West Conference. Really good fit. UTEP's an old WAC school. Never really felt right for them to not be in with the Mountain West. And I think that's going to be a really good fit for that league. If they add UTEP and Texas State, they're going to be able to remain viable as a football conference, a G5 football conference moving forward. Meanwhile, the Pac-12, as was reported last week and then kind of squelched a little bit, well, it's being more widely reported now. Gonzaga is going to join the Pac-12 conference as a basketball member, a non-football member. Of course, Gonzaga doesn't have football, has not for many, many, many years. There had been talk in the past about the Big 12 being interested in adding Gonzaga and seeing Gonzaga's value as a basketball-only member. But the Pac-12, in their desperation, is willing to do something that I am certain that the Big 12 would not do. And that is give Gonzaga a full membership share, even without them bringing a football program to the table. The desperate teams in that conference are going to be more willing to do that. Why would Kansas or Kansas State or Oklahoma State or Baylor or TCU or any of those schools, why would they have voted to make Gonzaga a full member receiving a full share if all they brought to the table was basketball, no matter how good that basketball may have been? So it makes sense for Gonzaga. I understand why the Pac-12 is doing it. I also absolutely understand why the Big 12 did not. Lastly, on the No Show Today show, I wanted to address the passings yesterday of two giants in the sports world in a figurative sense, one of them in a very literal sense. Dikembe Mutombo, the former NBA player and one of the greatest defensive players in the history of the NBA, passed away due to complications from brain cancer. He was only 58 years old. Mutombo was a dominant force in the middle for some really good Denver teams, some good Atlanta Hawks teams, and was well traveled toward the end of his career. Had some time in Houston, had some time with the Knicks. Known for that finger wag you're seeing in that picture there when he would block a shot. Mutombo came to Georgetown University as a collegiate player, as an extremely raw talent, really learned how to play the game in college, and then won 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards in the NBA, but maybe should be better known for what he did off the court in his humanitarian efforts, most notable among those giving $15 million of his own money to build a hospital in his homeland of the Congo. And all of his work with Basketball Without Borders, the African Basketball League that was a recent startup. He grew the game. He made lives better in the place that he was from. He touched a lot of people in positive ways. And that is a greater legacy than anything that he could have left on the basketball court. On a personal note, Dikembe Mutombo was one of my first favorite athletes. I grew up, of course, in the Denver area, and the Nuggets were really my first favorite professional sports team. So when Dikembe Mutombo was drafted, I was 5 years old. And when I tell you a literal giant, that's what 7-footers seem like to 5, 6-year-old basketball fans. The first autograph I ever stood in line to get was Dikembe Mutombo's. It was at a sporting goods store in downtown Denver. My dad took me. Dikembe Mutombo and Walter Davis were both Nuggets at the time, and they were signing autographs. Winston Garland was there too. And I still have those autographs of Dikembe Mutombo and Walter Davis. They've got a place of honor in my man cave in the basement. Both of them are gone now, sadly. Walter Davis passed away a little while ago, and now Dikembe Mutombo has passed as well. But a gigantic legacy that he leaves, not just as a basketball player, but as a man. It's aspirational, I think, to be a better man than a ball player, and Dikembe Mutombo was every bit of that. Pete Rose, on the other hand, was a better ball player than a man. And what a ball player Pete Rose was. There's no denying the kind of player and the kind of impact he made over the course of his Major League Baseball career. Set aside the hit record, which Pete Rose himself would never let you do. He'd remind you, of course, at every turn that he was the hit king with 4,256 career hits, a record that will never be touched. But for so many people who grew up in the 60s and the 70s, Pete Rose defined baseball. Pete Rose made people fall in love with the sport of baseball. The way he played the game, the way he approached every at-bat, every opportunity to run the bases, every play in the field with headlong energy that earned him the nickname Charlie Hustle. Fun story about that, by the way. It's either Whitey Ford or Mickey Mantle who gave him that nickname. The anecdotes are never clear, but they didn't mean it in a nice way when they called a young Pete Rose Charlie Hustle. Pete Rose embraced it, made it a part of his identity, made it a part of who he was, and never stopped playing the game in that fashion. And if all we were talking about were the on-field exploits, that's where we could leave it. As a player who defined baseball for an entire generation, a cog in one of the greatest teams of all time, the Big Red Machine Reds of the mid-1970s, a 3-time World Series champion, and the all-time hits leader. If only we could leave it there. We can't, of course. Pete Rose ended up banned from baseball for life for betting on baseball while the manager of the Cincinnati Reds. It was a part of a gambling addiction, I think we could fairly call it, that he was never able to shake, and that may have even impacted his career in some ways, though he would claim it never did. There were also other things that Pete Rose did off the field, some disturbing allegations regarding his treatment of women and relationships with women who were underage. We know he was a lousy husband. That is certainly on record. Pete Rose as a person is not a Hall of Fame person. Pete Rose as a player was a Hall of Fame player. And as difficult as that may be for some to recognize the two, I think it's pretty easy to just leave it there. As a player, the style he played with, the attitude he played with, the skill, the hard work, all of those things, aspirational still. Everything else about Pete Rose, well, it won't be nearly as fondly remembered. Pete Rose, better ball player than a man. Dikembe Mutombo, better man than a ball player. That's going to do it for today's The No Show Today show. Little 20-minute sound bites, a little fun to have on a day where we don't have an edition of 580 Sports Talk. We'll run this back tomorrow because we won't have a show tomorrow either. We'll recap Game 1 of the Major League Baseball playoffs, including the Royals and the Orioles, get you set for Game 2. Any other pertinent sports news, we'll get to it on tomorrow's The No Show Today show. I'm Dan Lucero. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube page, 580 Sports Talk, if you have not done so already. Appreciate you hanging out. We'll talk to you tomorrow.